Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you sincerely for letting me be here. In these 20 minutes, referring to the necessity of terminology standardization for the gʁafematik, gʁafemic studies, as we have already heard this morning, and I guess also yesterday, I'm going to resume the story of attestations and meanings of the term Digraphia in order to elaborate, or at least propose, a definition for this term for the gʁafematik and linguistic studies. At first, I think it's useful to remember that the metalinguistic reflection has spread the opinion that language and writing are two distinct systems of signs. The second exists for the sole purpose of representing the first, as Saussure unfortunately wrote. Therefore, there is not a linguistic conception of writing system since the écriture is just the written depiction of the language. There was not a linguistic conception of writing system. Even though sociolinguistic studies have seeded the soil where now we can find different approaches to the study of writing systems. The idea that scripts are able to modify a community of speakers is now disseminated, since they are bound to religious motion, identity claims, and even scientific progress. Florian Kolmas stated that at point 01, rather than being mere instruments of a practical nature, they are symbolic systems of great social significance, which may moreover have profound effect on the social structure of a speech community. Nonetheless, even nowadays, several linguistics have seen an utilitarian relation between language and writing, because writing is not language. Writing does represent language, where language must be interpreted as phonetic representation. Indeed, although various studies have been published in recent years regarding adoption, change of script and scripts, no linguistic dictionary, which I'm aware of, has yet recorded the lexicon referring to this phenomenon. For instance, Busman-Cotticelli offered the explanation for the term Digraphia at point 03. Looking for the meaning of this term, I have recollected its attestation, which follows now. The adjective digraphic appeared for the first time in the narration written by Demetrios Pierides, bank manager in Larnaca and collector of classical antiquities. Pierides recounted his discovery of an inscription with the same text written down in two different scripts, Greek and Cypriot. It is highly unlikely that Pierides have been trained in linguistics, but you could say better than me, maybe. But surely he was an enthusiast and amateur of Greek word. Therefore, it is likely that he had formed the word digraphic with the Greek prefix di, to double, lacking the functional distribution sense. In the same year, the numismatist Alfred von Sallet used Zweischriftig to describe the inscription he recovered from some Cypriot coins. He found that two different scripts, Cypriot and Greek, were employed, an instance for which he begged our pardon, but no words at that time appear more suitable for describe it than Zweischriftig, which is a new formation in the absence of an appropriate metalinguistic word. But, okay. In 1959, something new appeared in the linguistic studies. Charles Ferguson introduced the concept of diglossia as, and I read, a relative stable language situation in which, in addition to the primary dialects of language, there is a very divergent, highly codified, superposed variety, the vehicle of a large and respected body of written literature, either of an early period or in another speech community, which is learned largely by formal education and is used for most written and formal spoken purposes, but is not used by any sector of the community for ordinary conversation. Thus, the digraphic sense of functional distribution refers to this definition. Indeed, immediately following Ferguson, digraphia has been perceived as a sociolinguistic typology or category. I use the word typology in comparison with other typology in linguistic, but we can talk about it. The linguist Robert Laffont, describing the feature of Occitan, which reveal both two linguistic varieties, French and Occitan, and two graphic varieties, Classic, the French, and the so-called Mistral, wrote that the diglossic situation of Occitan was peculiar since it was completed by a digraphic situation too. For the reference to Ferguson was more than evident, it is not clear if Laffont conceived digraphia as a functional distribution of scripts, because here we are also dealing with orthographies. Otherwise, Petrezima, describing the functional distribution of two scripts, in this case Latin and Arabic, in which Hausa is attested, clearly referring to Ferguson Diglossia, he discerned whether we can talk about a case of digraphia or a case of diorthographia, phenomenon just now observed in Laffont. And he wrote, digraphia, two types of written form of one language coexist, based upon the usage of two distinct graphical system scripts by the respective language community. Diorthographia, two types of written form of a particular language coexist using the same script, but they are based upon the usage of two distinct orthographies by the same language community. In this landscape, I think that Giorgio Raimondo Cardona should be rewarded as the first scholar who explicitly wondered, and I'm sorry for the Italian, quanto dei concetti propri della sociolinguistica e della etnolinguistica della comunicazione possono essere estesi alla scrittura. He evidently used sociolinguistic categories, for instance, writing communities, as well as speech community, prestige and writing repertoire for writing system, and you can see at point 3.5. He also added, in ogni società le varie produzioni simboliche si diversificano e strutturano in modo funzionale alla società. Le differenze verranno sempre resi funzionali agli scopi della società. Having said that, it is now possible to reinterpret the paragraph at the following point, 3.7, where Cardona illustrated the spread of the Arabic alphabet, because even if he did not explicitly write which ones could be the functions of respectively the Arabic alphabet and the Latin alphabet, due to what we have just examined, Cardona meant digraphia as coexistence of two writing varieties sorted in different purses. In the last decade of the 20th century, the functional distribution is an essential part of the digraphia concept. As a matter of fact, based on the case study of Serbo-Croatian and Japanese, several new models emerge. In parallel to Ferguson's model, Chiang, at point 3.8 and 3.9, proposed a similar one more suited to digraphia, since it distinguished more analytically how the distribution of scripts does work. He related more prestigious scripts to semantic scripts, while less prestigious scripts are related to phonetic scripts. From the point of view of a speaker whose writing system does not accurately represent the phonetic form of the language, this distinction turns out to be interesting because orthographia, as the correct graphia, is not necessarily phonetic. It is rather more common for the contrary. In less controlled context, where a less prestigious script is used, there could be orthographic mistakes. Meanwhile, in more controlled context, where a more prestigious script is used, there should be no orthographic mistakes. Since a scientific terminology for the contact between scripts has not been established yet, many scholars explain examples of digraphia without mentioning the term. Among them, I mentioned Sergio Pernigotti, who wrote about ancient Egypt's writing system, in particular hieroglyphs and hieratic, which, in my opinion, could be a perfect example of the so-called diachronic digraphia, and you see the citation of Berlanda, for which the internal differences in style of Egyptian hieroglyphs led to an internal digraphia, developing two different scripts which are used in two different domains, hieroglyphs for monumental inscription, hieratic for administrative documents. Here Berlanda wondered why these two other scripts have evolved and suggests that the reason lay in the necessity of keeping it clean from change. This idea, in my opinion, has twofold implication. The first one is that uncommon domains of use allow the user to change the style of the script. The second one is that the user considers suitable for the uncommon domain the script in charge. The consequence of the first is that if the calligraphy of hieroglyphs have been modified until becoming hieratic, we should have found some attestation of an intermediate phase between them, and we have not. The consequence of the second is that we could have found some attestation of hieroglyphs used in non-monumental text, and we have not. For this reason, it is most likely, in my opinion, that the reason for the creation of one and then another script lies in the spread of use of writing in Egypt. From the point of view of users, at first it was prerogative of scribes, and from the point of view of domains, at first it was used only in monumental text. Recently, 2 volumes have been published regarding contact between writing systems. The first one, by Buncic, Lippert, Rabu, in 2016, illustrates a theory which Italian scholars of the second book have been already aware of, a kind of heuristic model which investigates all the so-called biscriptality cases, like digraphia, diglyphia, diorthographia, biglyphism, and so on, identified on the basis of 2 axes. The sociolinguistic one, which describes the relation between the 2 scripts in terms of privative, equipollent, and deassituative relation, and the gʁafematik one, which identifies 3 levels of distinction: script, glyphic variation, and orthography. The only one called Digraphia in this book is when there is a clear functional division of domains of the considered script. And I read, Digraphia with script in a private opposition based on a diaphasic, diastratic, diamesic, or medial distribution. On the other side, in the other book by Ioni Tribulato of 2015, even if they explicitly refer to the previous text, the concept of digraphia appears from a different point of view. As you can read at point 4.2, as well as speakers' communities being diglossic, languages are digraphic, which do not always show the criterion if they prefer one script. For this reason, it seems pointless to compare this volume to the previous one, since the starting point of the matter is completely different. Ioni Tribulato consider writing system a feature of language, while Buncic, Lippert, Rabu consider it as a linguistic object itself of research. In fact, they clarify, and I read, there are also many cases of digraphia in which the feature of governing the private opposition does not lend itself to a high-low distinction. The use of 2 writing systems for one language is a case of linguistic variation. Therefore, it seems appropriate to use the well-known model of linguistic variation assembled by Coserio, consisting of diachronic, diatopic, diastratic, and diaphasic variation. In summary, nowadays there are 2 understandings of digraphia. One, peculiar to the notion of Diglossia, interprets it as a linguistic change, the use of 2 scripts in two scripts in private opposition for the same language, where there can be identified variations like diaphasic, diastratic, or diamesic ones. The order provides the notion of prestige as the single determining factor for the choice between scripts. The resulting definition of digraphia should include all the previous illustrated ideas, but in this case it could fit a dictionary in terms of unambiguity and coherence. In my opinion, it would not be wrong to add the following to Busman, Cotticelli, Curras, or other dictionary, for maybe the one who Professor Christina talked about before. To add the following definition to a dictionary. Digraphia, a sociolinguistic typology used for describing writing system contact in a speech community where several factors like diaphasic, diastratic, or diamesic lead in the choice between scripts. Thank you.
Now we'll take questions. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you for this interesting overview. Thank you very much for this interesting talk. I have a question regarding your definition you propose for this lexicon, for this dictionary of Busman, and a remark, because Busman is only one dictionary,
Yeah, sure.
and it is not it doesn't refer to grapholinguistics. Normally, there are other dictionaries, not only the dictionary I presented this morning, but for example, Metzler or so on. You should check it in other dictionaries.
Thank you. Please give me a reference if you could, because I do this work all alone, and I really wonder if some of you could give me advice.
I will give it in the coffee break.
Thank you.
But just for your definition, why do you write here a sociolinguistic typology and not, for example, a sociolinguistic term or notion? A typology, this is another value, another meaning for me.
Okay, well, I choose typology referring to the text of Buncic, Leiper, Trabu, which called typology in many of these cases, but this is one reason. The other one is because I would like to fix the idea that this term refers to also a category. We can talk about a category instead of typology, which could apply to all kind of writing system. In this way, I mean typology, but yeah. Referring to metalinguistic and to gʁafematik study, we can talk about term. So.
Other questions? Yes, Yannis.
Boglioni says una lingua specifica, so he says that for a single language you are using two different writing systems.
Sorry. Okay.
So I wanted to ask, take for example the case of Greeklish. Greeklish is Greek written in Latin alphabet, and Joseph gave an example of Arabic written in Latin alphabet, but in both cases, Greeklish and Arabizi, the vocabulary also tends to change, because since you are in a different alphabet, you have also the tendency of using English words and so on. Is this a case of digraphia?
Well, the definition here by Baioni Tribulato could fit these cases. Well, in the meaning that a specific language meaning this kind, so Greekish or Arbresh or I don't know, many other. Yeah, in this way. I have never thought of that indeed, because a specific language, I intended it in the way that Digraphia refers only to language and not to the writing. But yeah, in this case, we can specify this in a variety of a specific language. So in this case, you saw Greekish or other, or Spanglish, or something like that. Yeah.
Other questions?
May I say something? Sure. Okay. To the lady that before referring to Karian, because Karian and Lishan and Lydia are the subject of my PhD thesis, so I can tell something. The actual system in which Karian is transcribed are changing. Because also Adiego, which is one of the three of the supplement, nowadays tell that 3 graphemes of Karian, which are the one like this and the one like this, are biphonematic, and also the nasal vowels, the grapheme for nasal vowels, are biphonematic. So we have to be very careful in using this kind of models for especially Karian, which is the most chaotic alphabetic writing system in Asia Minor, because there are almost certainty that these graphemes are biphonematic, so we have to transcribe it with 2 phonemes. Just it. Yeah, please.
Other comments, questions? Yes.
I have another question. I would want to come back to the definition of Bussmann, and it is an Italian translation here on your slide. But as far as I understand, it means it is explained in that way that Digraphia means that 2 graphemes are used for 1 phoneme. Yeah. Only this is the explanation here for Digraphia, and you refer to other dictionaries where it's the same explanation is given. Now, if you propose your notion of Digraphia, how would you distinguish between these totally different concepts of Digraphia?
The meaning referred by Bussmann could be called diagramma in Italian, digrapheme, and digraphia, which seems more general, could be referred to the situation of the writing system at all. Indeed, in the same dictionary, you can find digrapheme, in Italian digrafo, which have the same meaning. So, yeah, we have to distinguish between them. We can do that. I don't know. Tell me your opinion.
If she includes your definition?
Oh, well, no, absolutely. No. I have started my lecture telling that I think there is a necessity to a standardization of terminology, even for the name of study. So, gʁafematik, gʁafemics, let's decide together for one term and go further, at least. So this is just a just a overlook to two words. You say digraphia and digrapheme, which in this dictionary, but also in others, have the same meanings. So we can distinguish it, and we can use both of them, but in 2 different senses. So, but not mine.
Any other questions? If not, let's thank Sveva for her interesting history. Thank you.